Hello, everyone. Bruce Hangen here. If you were in our live audience observing the Orchestra of Indian Hill in action, you'd probably have no problem in identifying our first violinists and our cellists just from the simple fact that they sit right up there at the front of the stage. But as you know, there are so many other wonderful musicians and individuals farther back on the stage that you may not be able to see who play oh so important roles in the orchestral repertoire. One of those people it's my pleasure to introduce to you for this Meet Our Musicians interview, Deborah Feld-Fabisiewicz, our harpist. Deborah has been with us for many years and brings a wealth of experience to her very important role as the sound of the harp always adds an exquisite color to our overall orchestral fabric. Welcome, Deborah.
Really looking forward to talking with you, Deborah. Thank you so much for being with us. As we mentioned to each other just a little while ago, I mentioned that I wasn't sure when you actually started with this orchestra, because I know I've been with the orchestra almost 25 years, and I'm positive that you were a member of the orchestra before even I arrived. So talk to us a little bit about what was your path to getting here?
Well, it started in Detroit. I'm originally from Detroit. And I went to a Detroit public high school in downtown Detroit. It was called Cass Technical High School. You could air conditioning and refrigeration on one side, and they had a science and arts side that was phenomenal. It was a public school that, believe it or not, had a harp department, had about 9 different harps and a wonderful music department. And I remember I played the piano starting when I was very little, but I just went to high school. It wasn't my brother went to that high school, so I went to that high school. And I thought, what a funny thing, seeing these harps. When will I ever have the chance to play this, to try this again? I'll try it. And it was amazing. It was amazingly challenging and interesting. And the woman who ran it was known in the harp world. But that was it. I mean, okay, I was lucky. I had this introduction, but I went on to school and I went on to college, and I came to the East Coast to go to Brandeis as a music major, but not really with any conviction. So much so
as a pianist.
As a pianist, I liked chamber music, playing chamber music, but to make a living, you need a much more oomph and much more drive than I had for that. The condensed version is that I ended up dropping out of college. And I thought, I got a job, a 9-to-5, like secretarial job. And I thought, maybe I should do something so my brain doesn't sort of just rot, I should just do something. And I remember picking up the phone and just calling Ann Hobson-Pilot, who was the second harpist at the BSO there. And I called her and I said, are you taking students? Because I played the harp in Cass and Velma Froud and Salzedo, and I sort of threw all these harp terms and names. And I was so gushy, and yes, I'd love to. And she said, well, yeah, I take new students. Do you have a harp? I said, oh. Little detail. I forgot I had to practice on something, and no, I don't have. Well, you call me when you have a harp. I went on with my life, and months later, I get a call from Ann, and she said, hello, this is Ann Hobson. And I said, who? Because I really just sort of didn't remember. And she said, I'm the harpist you call. The only thing I could think of, I was so gushy and enthusiastic that she remembered me, thank goodness, and she knew of someone renting a harp, what I liked them. So then I started playing with lessons with her, and I really enjoyed it and thought should do it upright, and went to the New England Conservatory to finish up my degree. and that's how I ended up then. It was freelance and auditions, and that's how I made my way to Indian Hill, amongst
Fantastic.
other places, freelance.
So I've got to go back a couple of steps,
Yeah,
back to Cass in
yeah.
Detroit. So you said you saw these harps sitting around and you decided you're going to try it. How does somebody who's never played the harp before sit down and try a harp?
Oh,
How do you know what strings to pluck?
had no idea it was the goo. And your hand position is so awkward, and there are pedals at the bottom. What do they do, and how do you coordinate? There was a very good harp teacher who was a student of Carlos Salcedo, who was um, the foremost harpist of the first half of the 20th century. He was a harpist, he was a composer, he was a teacher. He developed a certain technique that I play, that I use. So she taught, you sit down and you learn. The strings are set up, like the white keys of, and you learn. I forgot to tell you that the thing about Cass was Diana Ross graduated from Cass,
Yay.
but the rumor was that they didn't think she had a future. And see, and so I don't know. I didn't hear any rumors about me, but I kept plugging along. And
I'll be
and
a
I also
typical.
saw
Yeah, go ahead.
no, but I also saw no. I forgot to tell you that at that time too. I remember my father taking me to the Detroit Institute of Art. They used to have a concert series where I saw Dorothy Ashby and her trio. Dorothy Ashby was a jazz harpist long before it was really, it's really popular now, jazz harp, and she was just sensational. So there were these hints of, there was the harp at Cass, and there was Dorothy Ashby, and there was, I don't know, Ann Hobson Pilot, and
Hmm.
so.
Oh, interesting. So I was going to be a nerdy musician and say, "Who's Diana Ross?" But
Oh.
that's right. So you mentioned the strings. I know that strings on the harp, some people may not know this, have different colors. That's like every C natural is a red, yes?
Every
And
A C string.
every
That is
C,
C
right,
string,
exactly,
yeah.
not natural, right.
Right.
And then you also have blue strings. Are there
Sort of
more colors
greenish,
than
yeah.
that? Yeah.
Yeah, green.
Okay.
No, just the wire strings, have their own
Right.
feel, and versus nylon or gut. But listen, there are a lot of strings on that thing. It's just any help you can get. So it's a visual aid.
Right,
Is
absolutely. Gotcha.
is what it is.
And let's talk a little bit about the pedals. If I remember correctly, all the pedals on your right are to go faster, and the ones on the left are your brakes. Yes?
Almost, almost, but not even close. They make their three slots for sharp, natural, and flat. So the strings would look like the white keys, are set up like the white keys of a piano, and the pedals make the accidentals, make the sharps and flats. So you can be playing all the right strings, but if you don't have the pedals, Bach can sound very much like Schoenberg all of a sudden,
Hmm.
Um, so it's very, very, I mean, how to coordinate it all. It's tough.
Yeah,
It's tough.
what people need to know is that oftentimes, much of the time that you take in terms of practicing, besides actually playing the notes themselves, is actually figuring out what your pedaling is going to be,
Right.
which pedals you need to change when, so that all the
Right.
right pitches are at the right spot at the right time, and be incredibly complicated.
It is, and so when you make a C sharp, it's not just that one specific C sharp that you might have to, have, but all the rest of the C's of the piece are sharp until
Right.
you change it. And so that's why it's a little harder to play jazz, because there are a lot of chromatics, and it's tough to move the pedals that fast and cleanly, and it's very difficult.
So speaking of the harp,
Yes.
tell us about if let's say, like you had to for Ann Hobson Pilot, if we had to go buy one, if we wanted to buy one, where would we go for that? Are there a lot of different manufacturers or only a couple? What would be our basic choices? I actually, in preparation for tonight, I went on to eBay to see if you can just buy a harp on eBay. And actually, I saw one Lyon and Healy
Really?
available for $18,000. But all the other harps are Irish Celtic type
Yeah. Yeah.
harps,
Well,
lever harps.
yeah.
And so, what would be your advice to all of that?
Well, the major companies are Lyon and Healy in Chicago, and Salvi. I don't know where Salvi might be in Chicago as well. I would go with the big names to see first, and there are different sizes. My harp is sort of the concert grand model of harp. They're a lot smaller, if you're a young person interested in the harp, you'll start out with a smaller harp. They have smaller sizes. And I mean, I think they're better now. I mean, when I bought my harp, which was many years ago, I had to wait quite. I mean, they were built really by hand, and I had to wait years before mine was ready. And also watch that price go up and up and up with each new part they put on the harp. But I think they're better now about that. But
Yeah, yeah.
that's where I would go. Or Anne knew of people who had. You want a decent instrument, if my opinion. I mean, if you're
Right, right.
interested.
Do they come decorative versus plain, or any different?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And you'll see better when I play my harp. Actually, people are often surprised because it's Art Deco. It's not that gilded harp with the pretty flowers. They're beautiful, the other harps, but I liked this style. It was the Salzedo style, this harpist that I mentioned earlier. He actually came up with this style, and it's very modern and very Art Deco, and I love it.
Mm-hmm.
But there are plain harps. There are ebony harps. They don't all come in the light color wood.
Mm-hmm. And is that $18,000 price I saw on eBay, is that about normal for a regular sized harp?
It really, they can vary so much, Bruce. I
Really?
really wouldn't
Okay.
know.
Is it are harps like say a violin or a cello where sometimes age helps it a lot
Yeah, yeah,
in terms?
I think it does. I mean, you don't want the soundboard to come up and pop, but yes, I think it does get better with age to a certain extent. Yes,
Okay.
yes,
So
yes.
talk to us about being a harpist for instance, at the Boston Conservatory. We have maybe a half a dozen harp majors, and I just oftentimes wonder. So when they graduate, where do they expect to go? And are there how many orchestra jobs are out there on a year-to-year basis? Is it possible to make a living playing solo recitals and gigs, or do you have to depend on weddings every day of the year to make a living as a harpist? Any of those? What happens to a future graduating harpist?
Well, I looked for auditions. Uh, I there are very few and far between, and I did you sort of put your. I can't remember how I first started, but I did a lot of freelancing and did a lot of weddings. Yes, I did. There was a time when it was really quite the vogue um, to play harps in fancy hotels. I remember playing at the Ritz the night of the first night. First night where it was like a conga line of about 10 people. That was about it. And I stopped playing, and everybody politely clapped after they walked by the cafe. And that was first night. That was the first night in Boston. Um, yeah, I mean, I did shows. There were summer shows. Those are really fun to do.
Hmm.
Musicals. I love doing that and taking auditions where
Hmm.
I could. Um, I took an audition. I was lucky enough after I graduated, I was principal harpist with the Albany Symphony Orchestra, which
Mm-hmm.
it was fine. It was a
Mm-hmm.
nice start for me, and I did a lot of freelancing. I know that I remember actually, Bruce, the very first time I met you. I can remember it because I was asked to play second harp in Portland when you were conducting there. And it was an overnight, did I ever tell you this? It was an overnight pops concert of some sort, just a rehearsal, the concert, and you leave the next day. It was the blizzard of 78 or whatever that was.
Oh, yeah.
And I stayed there. It took me about 7 hours to drive up from Boston, which usually takes 2 hours. And I was stuck there for a week. And the other members of the orchestra were leaving because they could get on a train, but I couldn't pick up my harp and go on a train. But I remember coming to the hall, and the hall that was my first, freelance. I think it was before Albany, but I was so in awe, and you were the conductor.
And here we are back together again.
And here we are.
And have been for a quarter of a century.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, I remember that storm. There was it was February of 78. And if I remember correctly, we had a guest composer visiting, and the storm hit, and either because we canceled the rehearsal or it was after the rehearsal or something like that, the composer and I went to DeMillo's floating restaurant for dinner. And this huge floating restaurant is going like this, just even though it's moored. We were both feeling a little bit nauseous. It was just very, very strange. Oh yeah, I remember that storm all too well.
And it was just overnight, so I just brought a toothbrush. I thought I'll be home. I was doing sit-ups every 10 minutes just so I was there a week. I had nothing to do. Didn't have a book. I didn't have. That was terrible. So that's what you do. You schlep your harp. Driving up there, I remember the snow, making this snake-like pattern on the road, and I was too far gone to stay. I mean, I was too far along to return home. It was horrible. Not the happiest memory, but that's part of the
part of the gig, as they say. That's for sure. So we could talk all night about various stories like that. I'm sure. You actually have to schlep the harp yourself in your own car. How much does it weigh? And this obviously has an effect on what cars you can choose to buy.
Absolutely. It weighs about 80 pounds, but it's, I really felt I was a liberated woman when I figured out how to move my harp myself. I figured it out. It's a matter of leverage. And I used to sort of whip it out of the car and sort of cock it on my hip, and it would balance, and I figured it out. It's not fun, but I figured out how to do it.
And unlike the old days, you now have a little trailer that you can put it on with wheels, so it makes it a lot easier.
Well, I have the dolly. Well, actually, that's a very funny thing that reminded me, because when I graduated from the conservatory, people were getting trips to Europe and for presents, for graduation presents. And my father made me a dolly. He took a square piece of wood and like a mat from, a doormat, glued it on, and then put casters on it and a rope so I could put my harp on top of it that was before any of these fancy dollies. And I thought that was the coolest, just the coolest. It was great. Yeah. So
speaking of the smaller harps, we mentioned that before. We all know the term Irish harp or Celtic harp. Is there a Welsh harp as well?
There may very well be. I don't know, Bruce. I don't really know.
And we
it's
also
a different
mentioned
animal. It's like a
Is
different
it?
animal.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So what would be the real basic difference between, let's say, an Irish harp and the concert model that you have?
Well, they don't have pedals. They have these
Okay.
levers
Okay.
that you reach up and flip up when you need an accidental, when you need a sharp or a flat. More than
And
that, I'm not sure how it
do they
works.
do that? Do they flip those levers during a piece,
Yeah,
or
I think they
is
do.
oh,
I think
okay?
they do. I
So
think
it's
they do.
much more complicated than just sitting there and manipulating the pedals with your feet.
It's much more complicated to with the
I don't know.
pedals. Yeah.
I'm
Oh,
guessing.
you know, they're both hard to me. I don't know. They keep me busy. I mean, I can't really speak to
Yeah.
the Irish
Yeah. I
harps.
mean,
You know,
everything we do in this business is hard, right? Even conducting is hard, believe it or not.
I can
I know
believe it.
everybody watching this program thinks I just stand up there and look pretty waving a stick in the air, but there's much more to it than that. So speaking of orchestra,
Yes.
uh, unfortunately, harpists are almost always relegated to the back of the stage just because it's hard for anybody to be sitting behind a harp because of the sight lines.
Right.
Talk to us about the advantages, disadvantages of your location back there, and what makes it hard or what makes it easy playing that kind of repertoire. And sort of a related question is, we all know that orchestra members are supposed to watch the conductor. If you're looking to see what strings you have to play and also trying to read your music, how many eyes do you have to be able to watch what I am doing up there as well?
Well, hopefully I get the part and I can practice it and get it in my fingers so that I'm not looking all the time at my fingers. You know, muscle memory and rehearsing enough to looking at the part enough, being prepared. That's a big thing. I don't have any issue. You can put me anywhere on the stage. I am pretty flexible about that. The one thing that's hard for me is when I'm playing my heart out and ripping out the strings and the horns are doing like exactly what I'm doing. So there's no reason you can't hear me at all. What comes to mind is Don Juan. It's always on audition lists. And I'm playing arpeggios. There's one measure that you hear the harp. Dum, bum, ba dum. That's what you hear. The rest, I'm like
Right.
practicing, and you can't hear. It. So that's my gripe. But
Yeah, I suppose in recording studio you could hear some of that, at least the flavor of the harp.
yeah,
I think that's one of the wonderful things about composers who write for harp in an orchestra is that oftentimes, especially let's say the French composers, you get a real sense of a color that's going on. You might not be able to hear each and every note that you're plucking away, but at the same time, you will get a sense that there's that, whether it's a sweeping glissando or whether it's a specific little passage, you will hear that the color, the harp
no,
color, and that's so
right,
important.
right. Obviously, I mean, I often think, well, would it be the same piece if the harp weren't there? And I don't think there is some reason that the composer put it there. So you should
Right.
really just honor that. But um,
Yeah, it's actually interesting. I just happened to think that the second concert that we had to cancel in April
yeah.
was to have been the Brooks Scottish Fantasy.
Mhm.
um, with featuring Alice Hallstrom, but it also has a major harp part. And actually, we would have moved you closer to the podium, closer to the middle of the
Yeah.
stage for
Yeah.
that piece, just because there is some gorgeous music making that goes on between the two solos. So we're going to have to schedule that again. Speaking of repertoire, do you have any favorite
I
composers or
absolutely,
compositions? Yeah.
absolutely. But I have to say that the Fauré Requiem is top on my list only because it was the very first piece I played as a harpist. When I was at NEC, since I had done some music stuff at Brandeis, that transferred over, but I needed hours of lessons private lessons, and I wasn't good enough to play an ensemble. So I was put in at that when I first entered, and I was a singer. I was in some chorus. You had to be in some group. And when I found out I wasn't familiar with the piece. And when I found out that there was a harp part, I looked at it and I really thought I could it's not a difficult harp part. And so that's top on my list, only for sentimental reasons. But you did a great job for me, a great concert for me with the Debussy dances and with Mahler, the Adagietto. I mean, it doesn't get better than that. It's so lush and beautiful, and Chichester Psalms, Bruce. That would be a wonderful when we move into the new place.
Oh, sure.
That is gorgeous, and it's really well written for the harp.
Yeah, for everybody's knowledge, Chichester Psalms is a piece by Leonard Bernstein,
Right.
and it's actually a very popular piece. A lot of people do it. That's a great idea for the new hall.
Yeah.
Probably not for the Littleton High School. So
Right.
if you thinking about the new hall, you know what our configuration, we're going to be in semicircles as an orchestra, and so do you have your druthers? Would you rather be on my left or on my right, or directly in the middle? Does it make any difference?
It really doesn't to me. I'm pretty flexible that way. I know there are other harpists who are a little more demanding. I guess in that respect, I'm not. Just as long as I can have a sight line to you.
Right. And how is that sight line? Because there is another harpist I can think of who actually had to play on the stage so that she could see me through her strings as she was
Yeah,
playing like this.
yeah,
And
yeah.
the music I guess is there so she can turn it with her left hand, but then being able to see me through the strings. That speaking of Portland, that's
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
who was there.
yeah. I remember.
Hmm.
I do remember.
So French repertoire, basically the instrument is a French instrument, Ravel, Debussy,
Yeah,
Impressionism. If you're a harpist, you have to like Impressionism, yes?
yeah. I mean, Ravel, Mother Goose Suite, lovely, wonder.
Right.
I mean, you've been pretty good to me, Bruce. I said for programming, you've done a
What was
lot of.
what is that? What did you say?
um, that
No, I try to keep you involved. Certainly
you
can't do it
do.
all the time, but for sure. Even Mozart wrote a harp piece, didn't he?
It's really just not my favorite, but I'll tell you what I
No.
loved was Rodrigo. I
Uh,
bent your ear a couple times. It's written for guitar, but the Concierto de Aranjuez, I think is how you say it,
right. That's right.
and it's just breathtakingly beautiful as well. It's lovely. So I was lucky enough I did that, with some smaller orchestra. You have to love Tchaikovsky. I mean, you have to, how
Hmm.
many times, you're called to play the Nutcracker and
Nutcracker, Romeo and Juliet is a pretty good
Romeo and
harp part.
Juliet. Right,
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 right, right,
right,
right, right.
right.
Those these days, I guess it's Juliet and Romeo, just to be politically correct.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Wowie.
I just saw an article about that in some arts journal. These days now, it's Juliet and Romeo and Cleopatra and Antony.
Oh wow.
So,
Okay. All right. I've been schooled. Okay.
yeah.
All right.
So somebody was just wondering, could you I want to go back just to the specifics of the harp itself.
Sure.
Just how many pedals do you have there to work with?
7 pedals, one for each note of the scale.
Right.
Um, and each pedal has a notch that you push down with your foot or lift up. I mean, you get it out of the notch and put it where you need it. It's flat at the top, natural in the middle, and sharp all the way down. And each pedal has those 3 uh,
Notches.
notches. Thank you.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Not nachos.
not
Notches.
notch.
Yeah. So it makes sense, just sort of scientifically, that if you press down on the pedal, it's going to increase the tension of the string as you that makes it go up a
Yes.
half a tone.
Yes.
So the shorter, the tighter the string
Right.
is, the higher the note's going to be. And the same thing with if you come up to the upper notch, you're loosening the tension, so it's going to lower it. And they've got it all figured out scientifically so that it only goes by half a step each way. And then comes the issue of tuning the harp. I mean, my gosh, how do you do that? And how long does it take you?
Well, I have a tuning key, and there's a peg on the other side, and I just hook it onto the tuning key, and I tune it. I have a tuner, and I tune it up or down if it's flat or sharp. With this pandemic, I haven't taken it out too much, so it's kept its tuning a little better. When you take it out, you know, the change of temperature, and it can make it a little more time consuming.
Right.
And as you know, harpists usually have to arrive pretty early before all the other horn players and string players come in so that I can tune all the strings. And I have to say, Indian Hill musicians are very, very kind to me. They've over the years. I mean, that's something that harpist really appreciates, because it's tough when they're spitting into their, embouchures or whatever, and then I have to tune the harp.
Watch what you say. The brass players might have something else to say, have a different opinion.
Right.
But no, I mean, it's pretty amazing to see you, and actually any harpist I work with will be showing up in the hall at least half an hour ahead of time before rehearsals and concerts, just because you have to have that quiet time to tune up the instrument. And when you have how many strings to tune?
I have 47.
47 strings, so they all have, each one has to be tuned individually.
Yes.
Just like a piano tuner tunes,
Yes.
they're working out the chords and the intervals and all that sort of stuff. It's very complicated. And you do it mostly by ear, yes? Or do you have?
I have a tuner. I mean, I have.
Oh, you do. Okay.
I do.
Okay. And do you set the tuner for each and every pitch then?
It automatically goes to the next pitch. I set it to 440. Make sure that that's what the orchestra is using, and then with each string, when I go to the next string, it automatically goes up.
Gotcha.
There's an unbelievably complex mechanism with rivets and it's connected. I mean, it's beyond belief complicated how they fit together, and there are poles. There are pedal rods, rather, not poles. They're rods, 7 of them, that connect the pedals that go up the column, the column, this part of the harp, and connect it to, so that these little levers can increase. When I press the pedal, you can see the mechanism. It will move, and you can see it increasing or decreasing the length of the string. Unbelievably, I mean, I don't know how harp makers do that or how they ever came to be, but it works. It absolutely works. And you need to take the harp in to be regulated, just like a car. After so many miles, you have to take it in. And
when was that action invented? Approximately.
Does the 1800s sound right?
Yeah, late 1800s. Yeah.
I actually saw a harp in an antique shop. There used to be a harp. They tried the strings sort of fit in. There were 2 planes of strings that fit in, and it was a chromatic harp, but it was just so ridiculously hard to play and figure out that it never really caught on, but they tried.
Yeah, I've heard about that. So you mentioned that you haven't taken the harp out for obvious reasons lately. How are you getting along as an artist? What's what's giving your creativity any kind of impetus or motivation these days now that we're all stuck at home?
Well, coincidentally, Bruce, I mean, before you called me about this particular idea of coming and talking and playing, I actually pulled out the piece I'm going to play for all of you. It was the last time I performed this piece was on my senior recital at New England Conservatory, and I
Mm.
loved it. I loved it then, and it's just as cute as can be, and I love playing it now. Uh, and I started taking out older uh, repertoire that I had learned years ago, and just went on a little nostalgic tour, and have
Mhm.
tried to practice some of them, and
Mhm.
that's pretty much how I've. Then I got the call, your email, and was a little more focused, and
Mhm.
so that was very kind of.
So, what do you do for an audience? Not much anymore, yes, except for like what we have tonight.
Right. I
Yeah.
mean, and my poor husband, he just. Well, let me tell you, he's heard this piece a million times, and holy cow, he really deserves a little bit of credit.
Well, at
It's
least
really
you don't make
something.
them sit in the same room when you play for
Says who?
them.
Sometimes I have him tape me. Sometimes I have him try these. He's a good guy. So
That's good.
but it's
That's
been
good.
fun playing. Connecting with cousins and family and nieces and nephews, and
Right.
my husband's family is in Brazil, and we have them all over the world. So that's been
Right.
fun. It's been a good way to
So,
get back in touch.
as a professional musician, do you give much thought to what it might be like when we come back together again on stage, or do you think about the future of orchestras or classical music, or do you have those kinds of conversations with your husband or others?
I
What's
do.
going on in your mind there?
Well, I don't know if I really want to answer that question so much because I don't want to be a Debbie Downer because
Hmm.
it's tough. I'm trying to take each day. It's very tough. Past the election too. That's a difficult subject, and
Hmm.
uh, I I hope we get through it. I mean, get through it all and intact. And but I know I read a lot of in the New Yorker. I mean, orchestras all over the world are doing sort of what Indian Hill is trying to do.
Right.
Ways to keep subscribers engaged, and it, it's it's hard. We just have to get rid of this pandemic. I think
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so.
And as a musician, as a Orchestra of Indian Hill musician that's been with us for a long time, you've seen the orchestra grow over all these years. Just putting yourself into the near future when we come together again, whether it's at Littleton High School or whether it's our new facility, um, what piece would you like to do?
Oh gosh. I mean, if you're asking me, I'd say Chichester. I actually would. I
Hmm.
would. Um, Gosh, Bruce, I don't know.
Well, Chichester,
Not Don.
unfortunately,
How about
doesn't
this?
call for.
How
Sorry.
about this? Not Don Juan. It's
No,
just not one of my
We'll
favorites.
do Don Juan, but we'll put a microphone right in front of you so we can hear absolutely every note.
Okay.
Uh,
Okay.
Don Juan for harp and orchestra. So this has been great. And as you said, you've agreed to do something, play something for us tonight.
Right.
And if we have some time afterwards, we can even open it up to questions from other people who are observing. So tell us a little bit about what you're going to play, and then we'll let you
Okay.
do it.
All right. So I'm playing a piece called Traipsing Through Arkansas, and the subtitle is Concert Fantasy on a Theme of the Arkansas Traveler. You're going to recognize the theme. It's by Carlos Salcedo, and it's it's almost like variations on a theme. And he starts out with this cute little folk tune, and it gets a little hairier and hairier and wilder, and it's out there, and he brings it all home. And it's I don't know why I actually looked it up. He did several others of these. Turkey Strut, da dum ba dum bum ba dum ba. I don't know what intrigued him about all these Southern. There's another piece, Dixie. I don't know, but he seemed to like it, and this one is this one's the cutest.
Oh, can't wait. Let's do it. Let's do it.
Okay, but there's a spoiler alert. Once I play this, you will be singing this song for the rest of the night and the next week.
nothing like playing. It's beautiful, really
Thank
terrific.
Thank you.
And here we are going like this, but I'm sure you can't hear anything. So I know I speak for everybody. It was just really delightful. And yes, you're right. We probably will be singing this for hours and hours to ourselves as we continue through the night. So at this point, if anybody has any questions, we can let you can either unmute.
How do your hands tolerate this? Why aren't they bleeding at this point after plucking on those strings the way you do?
I have calluses. We don't use our pinky. And so I have calluses on my thumb and first 3 fingers. And you get used to it.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I remember I felt like a real harpist when I had blood drawn and they had to draw it out of my pinky because there was too callous. I thought that I really made it then. That's how but when you're building up, it can hurt sometimes.
Yeah. Well, you know, the same thing is true with string players. All their left hands, because they're busy pressing on those strings all the time. Violinists, cellists, violists, bass players in particular have very calloused fingertips.
You know, harpists spend half their time tuning their harp and the other half of the time playing their harp out of tune.
Yeah, absolutely. Or I love it when, you know, you're tuning, and then you hear a different A, and, you know, the harp, you're just like, this is, you know, what do you do?
What you get. Yeah.
Actually, there was one time, Bruce, not too long ago, I don't know what happened. Maybe I got a new tune or something. And do you remember I tuned it all down, a quarter tone?
Oh, that's right. I do remember that. Yeah. Yeah.
And you kept looking over at me and I kept looking back at you saying, I don't know I've never done that before, ever.
I know, it's a kind of crazy situation when you have something like that because there's nothing you can do about it at the time.
You were very
the old folks like Toscanini or somebody would maybe make an issue of it, yelling and screaming and stomping, but that just doesn't get you anywhere. It makes me remember conducting back up in Portland, Maine, when this is years ago when I was music director there. The organ was consistently out of tune and set to a different pitch than what the orchestra plays at. So we had to be extraordinarily careful about what repertoire we chose because the orchestra just couldn't adjust that as much as the organ was off.
Right.
And of course, you can't tune up an organ spontaneously either. So it's the same, definitely same kind of issue.
Well, needless to say, I felt absolutely horrified, and you were very kind. You didn't throw poison darts. You grasped the situation.
What can I say? What can I say? I'm a Bruce.
Nice guy.
Well, Deborah, this has been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. A really informative comments, and we can tell that you're a great personality, and of course, being a great personality, you fit into the Orchestra of Indian Hill so well, and you're a stalwart amongst us, and I, for one, really appreciate all you do for us there in the orchestra. Sometimes it's difficult to see you all the way over on the side there, but know that the appreciation from all of us is there, and we look forward to the next time we might be able to hear you play a solo with us as well. That would be terrific. And I'll keep in mind Fauré Requiem and the Chichester Psalms.